All right. We're back.
We are back.
Hello, friends. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you. A couple of things I wanted to catch us up on. One more item that's just kind of a point of interest regarding that stay that HPB had in Philadelphia. Remember, first of all, she got married to that Michael Bettinelli for a short period of time, and she had the problem with her leg, and then she also had the transformation that took place. 3 big events in her life that all took place within a short period of time of just a few months in 1875. But I wanted to read just something kind of funny, and for whatever reason, this wasn't included in the book that we were using, the one by Mary Kay Neff, but it is in this book, The Letters of H.P. Blavatsky. So let's go ahead and pick this up. I'll read this one little section to go into it. And this was the letter that was to Colonel Lippett in Boston when she was talking about her leg and making jokes about it, about this spiritualist who loved to write obituaries for spiritualists. She surmised he would have said, "Gone to meet her leg, indeed." So I summoned my best willpower, my Sunday one, and begged of the doctors and surgeons to go and look for my leg on the Centennial grounds. And we explained where that came in. I'm going to have Paul read just this short little continuation there.
I called in Mrs. Michener, clairvoyante.
Yeah, clairvoyante.
And had a talk with her. In short, I had prepared myself to die. Didn't care, but decided to die with both legs. The mortification had gone all round the knee, but 2 days of cold water poultices and a white pup, a dog by night laid across the leg, cured all in no time.
So, cold water poultices and a white pup will cure a gangrened leg, apparently.
That's the kind of magic prescription.
Yes. Remember that Moria had helped her a few times, and she had respites from the problem, and it seemed to be getting better, and then she would strain herself or overdo it, and then it would get worse again. But this was the final one that actually worked, and it's just kind of strange that the solution was cold water poultices, which I have no idea what that is. I assume it's just bandages around the leg of cold water.
Like ice or something, yeah.
Maybe not even, who knows? But cold water and the white pup. So she actually described to her family that there was a white dog that would lay across her leg at night. And for some reason, maybe the heat or whatever, or just a living being, provided energy or something that helped to heal that leg.
And the color white might represent a certain tone of energy.
It could. Mm-hmm. But here's the funny thing. Did you know that in Philadelphia today, there is a restaurant called the White Dog Cafe? And guess where it is? In the very house where she had this miracle cure. Anybody who lives in the area of University City, which is a suburb or a section of Philadelphia, can go check out the White Dog Cafe at 3420 Sansom Street.
How did you find that out?
I do research. And so the folklore continues even to this day about the white dog. I'll bet you that the people who work there at the cafe today have very little understanding of how that name even came about, because I assume that the cafe has been there for many years.
That is so interesting. My goodness.
So just one more bit of information that we find by reading all of the background stuff here.
How in the world would that have even happened? The owner of the cafe, when he or she decided to open up a cafe there, was inspired somehow to call it that because of what took place prior.
Obviously, there is folklore that continues in every location based on events that happened in the past.
So there might be some stories or some myths, basically, about
exactly. So it somehow continued long enough that it became part of the folklore of that region, that area of Philadelphia.
One more thing on the cure that we read about. We don't have specific information on how it was done or how she knew to do this. Did one of her caretakers at the time bring the dog in, or did Blavatsky just hear it or intuit and said, hey, I need you to bring me this white dog? I mean, we don't know how that would have actually taken place.
Remember, this was previous to the transformation that took place. So her communication with Moria wasn't great at this point. She was getting inspiration from him, but the inspiration was given to her through this Mrs. Michener, the clairvoyant. Apparently, Moria was able to communicate with her better and give her the information of what to do.
Okay.
Very interesting how all this works. Wow. One other thing, K.H. mentioned at the end of this letter, number 92, that despite her problems, they used HPB a lot because she could save them up to 2/3 of the power that was needed to accomplish phenomena, including transmission of communications, letters, and such. 2/3. And that would remind us of a session that we had quite a while ago. Session number 31, we were talking about letter number 52, the shortest one in the series. 7 words. Sinnett and Hume had been on about getting rid of HPB as an intermediary. And so they were trying to accommodate that, K.H. and Moria, and they were investigating potential other scenarios. One of them was to use some of their chelas to do that, including Alcott. So when Alcott and one of their other chelas came to visit Sinnett, they used that as a test to see whether or not they could transmit a message to him. And they did transmit a message, and the message was this: impossible, no power, will right through Bombay. 36 letters he managed to transmit without the power that HPB was supplying. Only 7 words could he transmit. And if you look at the actual message online, it doesn't flow. The handwriting doesn't flow as well as it does normally. And the B in Bombay is a little bit shaky and misformed. And he also said that it took him 2 weeks to recover from that effort that he made to do that.
Those few letters, from those few words.
Yeah. This gives us a clue as to why she was so necessary, not important, absolutely necessary.
This also gives us a clue into the management of our own energy. She clearly was powerful in certain ways that were useful to the masters. We all have power, or else we wouldn't be alive. We all have prana, and I'm just surmising that a lot of her energy, most of her energy, was being dedicated towards this, and that's what she wanted. She was a channel. And by way of doing that, several other things were not receiving a lot of prana, namely her physical body, which is why she was so sick all the time. To me, that makes sense. Maybe Terry can correct that, but she was overweight. She smoked. She maybe didn't dedicate a lot of willpower towards her physical health. But what did she dedicate all of her energy to? The service of humanity. I don't think we ever actually heard that being said, but that to me is kind of clear. You can utilize your energy for what you choose, or if you don't direct it, it'll go probably towards the path of least resistance or just dissipate out. But she could have redirected it and then used more of it for herself, but she didn't. She let the masters do what they needed. I think that makes sense. She could have dedicated it towards maybe exercise or towards willpower I'm not going to smoke, I'm not going to eat this meat. But no, she just let that kind of fall away, right? And just dedicated it towards what was more necessary.
Remember the last line of the prayer of St. Francis, our version, and it is in dying to the material world that we are born to eternal life. And that's exactly what she was willing to do, give up everything physical, including her own health, any attachment to power, to money, to worldly goods. None of that meant anything whatsoever to her.
Sorry to deviate, but I think this is very important because this is another clue as to why discernment is so important. When you read things like the yamas and niyamas in the Yoga Sutras, which I teach a lot in my teacher trainings, it specifically says the yamas and niyamas are be a good person, do your ethics and morals. Then what's the third one? It's asana, which relates to the physical health of your physical body. That's the third of 8 limbs towards enlightenment. However, every one of us has a different constitution, and every one of us has a different dharma. And these 8 stages that Patanjali gives us are not to be taken sequentially at all. When we say this in our book, it's cumulative and discernment. If one area is more appropriate for your focus, as HPB's was, her area of effort was to build a society, bring these teachings out to the Western world. Asana was the least of her concerns in this particular lifetime. Know that. And how do you know what's appropriate for you? We have to get in touch with our inner self. We have to meditate, calm the physical brain, close your eyes more often and get still more often. And you will be shown, or you will know what is most important for you. Where is your energy most needed? What's most appropriate for you in this life? For Terry, it's different than myself. For you, it's different than your partner probably. But we all have something that we can know and do. And that's what she was doing. She wasn't supposed to be a bodybuilder or a yogi master of physical asanas at all. She knew what she was going to do and used all of her energy for that. Just something to be aware of.
Yes. We also talked a little bit about that very thing in our last session, about our attitude towards money and worldly possessions. And we mentioned that you could have 700 billion euros in your portfolio and yet be far poorer than even one of the poorest chelas that the Mahatmas have. Jesus had a lot to say about that in the New Testament. He tells the story of the rich young man. When he was preaching in Galilee, he had quite a few followers who were very interested in his message, and they would follow him around every day and listen to his words. One of them was obviously a wealthy young man based on his attire and his way of presenting himself. And at the end of one of these sermons, he said, "Master," he said, "what do I have to do to attain the same level that you have attained?" And he gave him all of the commandments. Honor your father and mother. Don't commit adultery. Don't lie. Don't steal. All of these things that are listed in the 10 Commandments. The young man said, "But I do all of those things. What am I missing?" And he said, "Sell everything that you own and give the proceeds to the poor, and then come and follow me." And the young man went away very sad. Why would he be very sad? Because he was very wealthy. And guess where his attachment was? He was way more attached to his wealth than he was to any spiritual enlightenment. Jesus also said, you can't serve 2 masters. You can't gain what I am telling you about, which he called the kingdom of God, which is actually becoming a Mahatma, being part of the hierarchy. That's what he refers to as the kingdom of God, the hierarchy of our planet and the entire universe. That is the hierarchy. You can't serve that and be attached to the physical world and to all of its emoluments, money, power.
One of the questions that usually is brought up immediately when Terry and I have this discussion is, what? So you're saying that money is bad, or an enlightened person cannot have any degree of material wealth? And the answer is no, that's not true. They can. If you recall from a couple sessions ago, the masters actually have money themselves, and they have access to money. And the young man who was wealthy, I'm going to just guess that Jesus wouldn't have told him that if the young man was not attached to his wealth. It is possible, but extremely rare, for an individual to have significant monetary wealth and not be attached to it. Could it happen? Yes. Are there people that are wealthy that are less attached to it and more enlightened than other wealthy people? Sure. But most rich people are very attached to their wealth and not on the spiritual path, haven't progressed to any certain extent. But it is possible to be a true yogi and have a mansion and have wealth. How attached are you? If it's taken away like that, what is the reaction? What's the attachment? If there is no attachment, sure, have it, but you'll realize that you wouldn't necessarily need it unless you're doing something with it to help the world.
Jesus had a lot of things to say about this that are really, really helpful.
They're important, yeah.
He was saying, too, don't do like all of the hypocrites do, which is to pretend to be very pious. When you're praying, they would pray out loud in the street. Oh, look how holy I am, and I'm praying to God. And
well, it's kind of like Hume, unfortunately. I'm sorry to say that, but kind of like Hume presenting himself as a spiritual person on the path, and yet he's high society.
Right. And another thing he said was, why do you worry about your apparel, about looking good, about making an impact on the people around you? Why do you worry about that? He said, look at these lilies. He said, they don't work. They don't spin thread to create beautiful gowns to wear. And yet, Solomon himself, the king Solomon, was not dressed as nicely as one of these. So the point is that when you are doing good, working on behalf of humanity, nature takes care of you. You have whatever you need. And besides, we only need what? Like a bicycle and a hut, basically, right? No, if you are at peace in yourself, if you are on the path and you have no attachment to material goods, you can get by with whatever you happen to have, whether it's little or much. But the non-attachment is the key. Now, let's get back on track here. We are at the very end of letter number 92, and it's completely different. It's just an amusing incident that KH wanted to tell Sinnett. So I'll have Paul pick up there. He had just finished talking about how Moria said that they wanted HPB in conjunction with Sinnett to perhaps issue a supplement to the Theosophist in order to get all of this information out, because he had proposed changing the way that the branches were set up.
I cannot close without telling you of an incident which, however ludicrous, has led to something that makes me thank my lucky stars for it, and will please you too. Your letter with CC Massey's enclosed was received by me the day after you handed it over to the little man.
And that was one of the visits from Babaji, who was at first acting on behalf of Darbagiri Nath, and then when Darbagiri Nath wasn't acting through him anymore, still used his name.
I was in the neighborhood of Parijong at the Gunpa of a friend.
Gunpa being a temple, a spiritual place.
And was very busy with important affairs. I was just crossing the large inner courtyard of the monastery, intent on listening to the voice of a lama, and had no time to read the contents. So, after mechanically opening the thick packet, I merely glanced at it and put it, as I thought, into the travel bag I wear across my shoulder.
All right. So he opened the letter, didn't have time to read it, but just made a note of it. And Buddy stuck it in his shoulder bag.
But in reality, though, it had dropped on the ground, and since I had opened the envelope and emptied it of contents, the latter were scattered in their fall. There was no one near me at the time, and my attention being wholly absorbed with the conversation, I had already reached the staircase leading to the library door when I heard the voice of a young monk calling out from a window and shouting to someone at a distance. Turning around, I understood the situation at a glance. Otherwise, your letter would have never been read by me, for I saw a venerable old goat in the act of making a morning meal of it. Venerable old goat.
Goats will eat anything,
That's
apparently.
hilarious. The creature had already devoured part of CCM's letter and was thoughtfully preparing to have a bite of yours, more delicate and easier to chew with his old teeth than the tough envelope and paper of your correspondence epistle. To rescue what remained of it took me but one short instant, disgust and opposition of the animal notwithstanding, but there remained mighty little of it. The envelope, with your crest on it, had nearly disappeared, the contents of the letters rendered illegible. Jeez.
He had pretty much eaten a large portion of both letters.
In short, I was perplexed at the sight of the disaster. You can imagine how embarrassed I felt. I had no right to restore it, both letters coming from the eclectic and connected directly with hapless Pellings.
Foreigners.
He had no right to restore it?
No, because remember, he's been severely restricted on the amount of energy he can dedicate to these communications anymore. He's having to write the letters by hand, by himself now.
Seems like that would take more energy, though.
No, it doesn't. Any of these psychic phenomena that they were doing takes an enormous amount of energy.
What could I do to restore the missing parts? I had already decided to humbly crave permission from the Chohan to be allowed an exception in this dire necessity, when I saw his holy face before me, his eyes twinkling in quite an unusual manner, and heard his voice.
So he saw him psychically.
The Chohan, his boss, who has asked him to not use extra power for any of these communications.
And he was thinking of him, I'm going to have to go ask him, and all of a sudden he appears.
Why break the rule? I will do it myself. Aw, that's sweet.
Yeah.
What? These simple words, Kam mi tsar, I'll do it, contain a world of hope for me. He has restored the missing parts and done it quite neatly too, as you see, and even transformed a crumpled, opened envelope, very much damaged, into a new one, crest and all.
Yeah, so apparently he's got even better powers than KH does. He did a really excellent job of restoration.
What?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Now, I know what great power had to be used for such a restoration. Wow, this shows that KH is still learning a lot of things, even though he's a master.
Yeah. But this is giving him extra hope. Let's see why.
And this leads me to hope for a relaxation of severity one of these days. Severity of what? Of the rule, or the rule about
The severity meaning of the restriction.
restrictions, right? Hence, I thank the goat heartily, and since he does not belong to the ostracized Pelling race, to show my gratitude, I strengthened what teeth remained in his mouth, and set the dilapidated remains firmly in their sockets, so that he may chew tougher food than English letters for several years to come. So he is able to discreetly use his powers for other things if he deems necessary.
And the goat is not a European. He's not an Englishman. So him, they could help. But the English, they were forbidden to use except a very small amount of their own power. But because of HPB's power, they were able to do a lot in that direction.
So KH helped the goat, since the goat has been involved in some of these things, and that shows his kindness as well.
Well, I think it's amazing that he can practice animal dentistry,
Yeah.
maybe without a license, but,
Right.
but yeah, I would have him practice dentistry on me anytime.
Anytime. And now a few words about the chela. Of course, you must have suspected that, since the master was prohibited the slightest exhibition of powers, so was the disciple.
Now, this was the little man.
Why should you have felt a little disappointed for his refusing to transmit your letters to me via space in your presence. The little man is a promising chap, far older in years than he looks, but young in European wisdom and manners, and hence the reason for committing his several indiscretions, which, as I told you, made me blush and feel foolish for the two savages.
Remember that he had borrowed money both from Sinnett and someone else, a total of more than the equivalent of $1,000 today.
The idea of coming to you for money was absurd in the extreme. Any other Englishman but you would have regarded them as two traveling charlatans after that. I hope you have received by now the repayment of the loan, which I return with many thanks. Not is right about the phonetic, vulgar pronunciation of the word QT.
And vulgar means everyday, common.
People usually pronounce it QTO, but it is not correct. He is wrong in his view about planetary spirits. He does not know the word and thought you meant the Devas, the servants of the Dhyan Chohans.
This Chela, who called himself Darbagiri Nath, had been answering some questions, but he was a little bit confused and thought that Sinnett was asking about Devas when he was asking about Dhyan Chohans.
Now, you were calling Darbagiri Nath a Chela?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, both Babaji and Darbagiri Nath, the one who is operating through him. So there was some confusion as to whether he was talking about planetary spirits or devas in the mind of the Chela. So he answered the question incorrectly, and KH is now correcting that conversation.
It is the latter who are the planetary spirits,
Meaning the Dhyan Chohans.
and of course it is illogical to say that adepts are greater than they, since we all strive to become Dhyan Chohans in the end.
Yes, remember Dhyan Chohans, the title, indicates a very large range of individuals. Some of them are down near the level or at the level of devas, but they are also the very highest spiritual beings in the entire universe. So there are many, many gradations.
They shouldn't really all maybe be called the same title, though. Usually titles refer to a level of advancement or level of authority, if you will.
They seem to be okay with that, so I am too.
Still, there have been adepts greater than the lower degrees of the planetaries.
So there's so much overlap.
Yeah.
That's why they don't worry about how much range there is within one appellation.
Thus, your views are not contrary to our doctrines, as he told you, but would be if you had meant the devas or angels little gods. Occultism is certainly not necessary for a good, pure ego to become an angel or spirit, in or out of Devachan, since angelhood is the result of karma.
Well, interesting.
Wow.
And many angels have not been through the human kingdom yet. As they progress, there will come a time when they do have to enter into the human experience on some planet. And that may be a reason today why some people are just kind of airy-fairy in life. Very sweet, kind people, and yet their feet don't seem to quite touch the ground.
We haven't spoken much about this, but we may have mentioned it, but the Deva or angel kingdom is, I guess you can say, it's an evolutionary system of beings, but not humans. And they do use our planet, but not the physical globe. It's a different, I was going to say humanity, but a different species of being, basically.
It seems to have quite a lot to do with the elemental kingdom, because those are, in a very real sense, the low end of the angelic or Deva kingdom.
So it is an evolutionary scheme of beings connected with our planet, but not necessarily the physical world per se. Maybe a little bit. There is some overlap.
So, yeah, they're side by side, and then at points there is exchanging.
I believe you will not complain that my letter is too short. This is the long.
Yeah, it has taken us at least 3 sessions.
It will soon be followed by another voluminous correspondence. Answers to your many questions. HPB is mended, if not completely, at least for some time to come. With real affectionate regard, yours, KH. In the actual book, do you recall about how many pages this one was?
I don't.
Do you have the book nearby?
We're going to start a much longer one.
Oh, gosh.
Fun, fun, fun. All right. Letters number 93A and 93B.
They're so long they need to be divided into A and B.
Well, it's not that. It's another case where the questions got separated from the answers. But at least we have both questions and answers. He had made two big, long lists. One of them was about theosophy, and one was a business matter. So these are the answers to his questions pertaining to theosophy, or to the doctrine of the brothers. And Sinnett did not number these himself. He just wrote them out so that it was obvious that each one was separated from the other. KH took his questions, numbered them, and for some reason, the first three are numbered 1, 2, 3, and then for all the rest, he starts over again. Now, I'll tell you that in the book, these two letters cover 29 pages of the book. The first section is about the doctrine. That we're going to cover a little more thoroughly. But there's a very long section that is completely about the scientific discoveries of the day in the 1880s. So we're going to just barely cover those. There's no reason to delve into anything unless there's something of note that helps us to understand something. So here we are now with the first questions. I'm going to read Sinnett's questions, and then Paul will read KH's answers. So this is Sinnett speaking. This letter he received back with the answers still at Shimla in October 1882. Now, we've had a slew of letters back and forth for the last 2.5 months. Just an enormous amount of attention that has been given first to Hume and Sinnett. Hume has decided to leave and go off on his own, so now it's only Sinnett that they're dealing with. All right, this is Sinnett speaking, and he says, apologizing for their number, I herewith send a few questions. Perhaps you will be so kind as to take them up from time to time and answer them by ones and twos as leisure and time allow. Reminder, at your convenience, please send APS, meaning himself, those unpublished notes of Eliphas Levi's with annotations by KH. This was something that he had promised quite some time ago.
Sent long ago to our friend on Jocko Hill.
That's where Hume's mansion is, on Jocko Hill. And he had sent the manuscripts back to Hume. So Hume had them, but Sinnett was unaware, and they both lived in the same city, so they're not communicating very much at this point. Okay, here's his first actual question. There is a very interesting allusion in your last letter. When speaking of Hume, you speak of certain characteristics he brought back with him from his last incarnation.
All of us bring some characteristics from our previous incarnations. It's unavoidable.
Number 2, do you have the power to see the past lives of persons now living?
Unfortunately, some of us do. And yes, he said, unfortunately, some of us do. I, for one, don't like to exercise it.
Yeah. And people today love to obsess about who they were in a previous life.
They wouldn't if they knew they were someone bad or someone insignificant. They wouldn't care.
No, exactly. But when they pretend that they know, it's always someone very famous.
Oh, of course.
A royal person or an important person in history. Mary, Queen of Scots, or whatever. Number 3, if so, would it be improper from personal curiosity to ask for any particulars of my own.
Quote, "Know thyself, saith the Delphian oracle."
Yes, the famous Oracle of Delphi. Apparently across the doorway it said, "Know thyself."
There is certainly nothing improper in such curiosity, but wouldn't it be more proper to study our present personality before attempting to learn anything of its creator, predecessor, and fashioner, the man that was? Well, someday I may treat you to a little story. No time now, but I promise no details. A simple sketch and a hint or two to test your intuitional powers. That's cool. That's cool. Wow.
Yes. In all of the letters that are at the British Library, there's one little envelope called Folio number 6, and it contains some information. We won't reveal it here, but in our next session, we will take a look at what's inside that packet number 6. All right, so here's the second set of questions where they start renumbering again. So, question 1. Is there any way of accounting for what seems like the curious rush of human progress within the last 2,000 years as compared with the relatively stagnant condition of the fourth round people up to the beginning of modern progress?
It's the end of a very important cycle. Each round, each ring, and every race has its greater and its smaller cycles on every planet that mankind passes through.
Yes, we've covered in the past quite heavily all of these ideas about rounds, races, sub-races, and even branchlets. And this elaborate orrery of cycles within cycles within cycles within cycles. And so what he's saying is that at certain points, there is a major transfer of energy between two of these subsets. And yes, that's when there's a lot of activity. We're not going to try to delve into any great specifics in our discussion. We just want you to understand the general concepts. And if you want to, you could spend a lifetime trying to figure out the details on your own. But I don't have that long, so we're going to leave that to you.
You can also look at the yugas and the cycles of the yugas and remember that there are yugas that are larger and yugas like complete yugas and complete cycles that are smaller. And it's like a 4-dimensional model. So ages of enlightenment and declination in larger cycles of enlightenment and decline as well. So that's just a little more for you to chew on if you choose to research.
And please keep in mind, too, we pointed out in one of our follow-up sessions that we had discovered that it's not just 4 yugas. That's right, where everything falls off track. If you understand that there are 4 yugas up to the bottom part of the cycle, and then the 3 repetitions.
And then the top again.
Yeah, so when you start with the Satya or Krita Yuga, you also end with that. That wouldn't make sense that you jump all of a sudden from the Kali Yuga to the Krita.
Right.
So when you understand that, it's 7, not 4. Everything falls into place.
Our fourth round humanity has its one great cycle, and so do her races and sub-races, hence the smaller cycles within the larger cycle. The curious rush, in quotes, is due to the double effect of the former. The beginning of its downward course, and of the latter, the small cycle of your sub-race, running on to its apex. Remember, you belong to the 5th race, yet you are but a Western sub-race. Notwithstanding your efforts, what you call civilization is confined only to the latter meaning the Western sub-race, and its offshoots in America.
Right, because at the time, 1882, the vast majority of Americans were British and or other Europeans.
Radiating around, its deceptive light may seem to throw its rays on a greater distance than it does in reality. There is no rush in China, and you make a caricature of Japan.
He's pointing out that there are foci of energy at various times. But that doesn't mean everything else stops in other places. We have to keep something very much in mind. We're talking about races and sub-races, but that is the physical aspect. The entities, the monads inhabiting those bodies, change out over time. At some points when there's a focus of energy, the more advanced souls come in to inhabit them. But that reaches a certain level of accomplishment, and then that fades out, and the focus moves somewhere else. And then guess who is inhabiting those bodies? Not the most enlightened anymore. That answers a lot of questions. So this is why theosophy is so complicated. If you don't understand that, pure science, physical science, cannot possibly explain that at all.
The advanced souls that are not in the physical bodies until this rush at the end, they're in pralaya, they're waiting, or they're in devachan, they're waiting to reincarnate. And that's why sometimes many thousands or sometimes millions of years elapses between incarnations.
So here, keep in mind, 1882 in London, in England, the height of civilization for the entire world. It was the center of the world in many different ways. Power, money, commerce, sciences, arts, everything. They were the epitome. That's why these Englishmen were so proud of themselves personally and as a race. Guess what? That ain't the case anymore. The people inhabiting those bodies are no longer the most advanced.
A student of occultism ought not to speak of the, quote, stagnant condition of the fourth round people.
Yeah. So Hume and all the other British people were feeling very superior to everyone else in the world, including the Americans, the Australians, and everyone else.
Since history knows next to nothing of that condition, up to the beginning of modern progress, of other nations except the Western, what do you know of America, for instance, before the invasion of that country by the Spaniards? Less than 2 centuries prior to the arrival of Cortez, there was as great a rush towards progress among the sub-races of Peru and Mexico as there is now in Europe and the USA.
Yeah, and we know very little, but we have at least discovered they had very high, very advanced civilizations.
Let's see, what year would that be? Less than 2 centuries, so Cortez was probably in the 1300s.
No, he was early 1500s.
1500s, okay.
So like 1517 is when he arrived in Mexico, around there,
so
within a few years.
Less than 2 centuries prior to that.
Yeah, 1300s.
That's when the Machu Picchu and the pyramids.
Yeah, and it wasn't that long ago.
Right.
It really wasn't, but we have almost no information about them.
Right. Even though they were the fourth round.
No. Remember, the entire round is all of humanity. He's talking about the fourth race.
All right. Less than 2 centuries prior to the arrival of Cortez, there was as great a rush towards progress among the sub-races of Peru and Mexico as there is now in Europe and the USA. Their sub-race ended in nearly total annihilation through causes generated by itself. And we're aware of that. The Mayans, Aztecs, Incas, those.
And this is always the case.
Mm. And so will yours at the end of its cycle.
And it's the fault of the people. But remember, by then, its inhabitants are not that advanced, and they're the more coarse and unrefined of the monads, the souls that are available.
I thought we were saying that the more advanced souls are in the bodies towards the end.
Not at the end.
Oh, that's what you were saying. The more advanced souls come in at the peak.
At the beginning.
At the beginning. Oh,
they have to get it. We're going to see more about this. So at the beginning and to the rise, but then the focus shifts to some other location, and this is obviously going to decline. It can't sustain itself.
We may speak only of the, quote, stagnant conditions into which, following the law of development, growth, maturity, and decline, every race and sub-race falls during its transition periods. It is that latter condition that your universal history is acquainted with, while it remains superbly ignorant of the condition even India was in some 10 centuries back.
Yeah, now that was when India was the epitome of spiritual advancement.
So that'd be 1,000 years prior.
Yeah.
Your subraces are now running toward the apex of their respective cycles, and that history goes no further back than the periods of decline of a few other subraces, most of them belonging to the preceding fourth race. And what is the area and the period of time embraced by history's universal eye? At the most, a few dozen centuries, a mighty horizon indeed. Beyond all is darkness, nothing but hypotheses.
Yeah. Modern science knows very little beyond a few dozen centuries. And he's going to explain later why that is the case. So science, which thinks it is so grand and likes to strut its stuff, doesn't hold a candle to these guys who can see with their much more advanced instruments and vision far into the past as to why things are the way they are now. And they've got the knowledge, they've got the experience. Science is just a neophyte starting out, but they're not going to admit that. Question 2, or at any former period during the inhabitation of the earth by fourth round men, have there been civilizations as great as our own with regard to intellectual development, and which have utterly passed away?
No doubt there were. Wow.
Yeah, of course. The modern people, we think we're the epitome of civilization. We're not.
Egyptian and Aryan records, and especially our zodiacal tables, furnish us with every proof of it, as well as our inner knowledge. That's what you were just saying, how science, can't do that.
Right.
Civilization is an inheritance that passes from race to race along the ascending and descending paths of cycles. During the young phase of a subrace, it is preserved for by its predecessor, which disappears, dies out usually, when the former comes of age. At first, most of them squander and mismanage their inheritance or leave it untouched in the ancestral coffers.
Yeah, he's going to explain that a lot of these young souls, when they inherit what the more advanced souls have left behind, don't appreciate it because they didn't earn it. It's just given to them, and so they squander it.
You know what's cool about that? That's a macrocosmic version of the prodigal son.
Yes, exactly.
In our book, we talk about this. Well, Jesus has a version. Our version is a different version of what Jesus talked about. But the prodigal son's journey, which relates to the individual soul's journey, is an individual version of this. When a new race comes in, we could use the brilliance of the past races, but we usually don't. And it's kind of normal to not, until we get more advanced as a species in general. But we have to learn it for ourselves, squander it. We don't remember how to make fire at first or create a wheel. And then when we finally figure it out, then, okay, we might remember some more. And then but it's the same thing. It's a larger version of the individual path, which is a larger version of your own life when you're born into a body of a baby.
And the key is having earned the right to it. Even though it is given to you, if you haven't done anything, it's like winning the lottery. If you want to see some sad stories, go look at what happens to some of these lottery winners. Their life ends up worse than it was before.
Isn't that kind of more often than not happening? That happens more often
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
And I've known 2 lottery winners.
Oh, wow.
And neither one of them ended very well.
Oh, gosh.
But this also applies to the way the Mahatmas train their chelas. They let them make mistakes. They have to earn every single step. They will give them hints. They will kind of guide them slightly, but they never, ever just hand it to them because it would be completely wasted.
It's very obvious when you look at an uncontacted tribe, for example, or indigenous peoples, they're not unhappy. They're very happy. We see them toiling in the mud. They're making arrows out of bones. They have a loincloth. They are out in the sun exposed. They are happy. But they're trying to figure it out, right? They're trying to figure out things that our civilization figured out a long time ago. How to make an easy shelter, how to make air conditioning so we can feel more comfortable. They don't know that they're struggling in those areas. They're figuring it out. And some of them do not want to be shown better ways. There are some stories now of the very few uncontacted tribes in the Amazon who do not want to be contacted. They don't want to know how to make a better bow and arrow.
They don't want your religion either.
Oh, well, definitely not that. And this is actually how it's supposed to be, though. You know, they're supposed to try and fail, and we're supposed to try to help and fail. This is how it works.
This also applies to countries who invade other
by
countries.
Force. Yeah.
Under the premise of improving their life for them. We're going to be so grandiose.
It's subjective.
We're so helpful.
It's subjective.
Yeah, and it's all about greed and what can I extort from these people.
Yep. And do you have any gold in them there hills that I can take? And
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They contemptuously reject the advice of their elders. We're talking about the younger souls in the earlier stages of the subraces. They contemptuously reject the advice of their elders and prefer, like children, to play in the streets instead of studying and making the most of the untouched wealth stored up for them in the records of the past. Thus, during your transition period, the Middle Ages, that's one of the yugas.
Not that long ago.
Right? And you can consider that as one of the yugas. I think it's the Dwapara yuga, perhaps, where it's the middle of the cycle. I could be wrong on the name, though. During your transition period, the Middle Ages, Europe rejected the testimony of antiquity, calling such sages as Herodotus and other learned Greeks the father of lies until she knew better and changed the label to that of father of history.
Yeah.
Instead of neglecting, you now accumulate and add to your wealth. Like every other race, you've had your ups and downs, your periods of honor and dishonor, your dark midnight, and now you are approaching your brilliant noon.
So they haven't even reached their apex yet. It's interesting to see videos of different things through time. If you, for example, watch a list of countries' GDP over time, you'll see that during this very period, England was way ahead of everyone else. And then slowly America took over. And then other countries took over. And it's really interesting to see how quickly one can lose and go back in the numbers and someone else takes over.
When he says brilliant noon, he would refer to the apex, or I do remember the name, Satya Yuga, or there's another name instead of Satya.
Krita.
Yes, that. Or the Renaissance period could be parallelicized with this. I made that word up. The youngest of the fifth race family, you were, for long ages, the unloved and uncared for, the Cinderella in your home.
So during the Middle Ages.
And now when so many of your sisters have died and others are still dying, while the few of the old survivors, now in their second infancy, are just waiting for their Messiah, the sixth race, to resurrect to a new life and start anew with the surging along of the path of a new cycle. Now that the Western Cinderella has suddenly developed into a proud, wealthy princess, the beauty we all see and admire, how does she act? Less kind-hearted than the princess in the tale. Instead of offering to her elder and less favored sister, the oldest now, in fact, since she is nearly 1 million years old.
Meaning the Indians, the first of the fifth root race.
And the only one who has never treated her unkindly, though she may have ignored her. Instead of offering her the kiss of peace, she seeks retribution with a vengeance that does not enhance her natural beauty.
Doesn't treat her very well. Now that she has risen to prominence and fame and glory and wealth, looks down on her sisters and says, I'm going to pay you back for everything you did to me.
This, my good friend and brother, is not a far-fetched allegory, but history.
Yeah. So there is no reason to feel superior to someone. Yes, you may be on top today as a race, as a nation, as an ethnic group, or as a religion even. But guess what? That isn't going to last. someone else is going to take over. Your affiliation is going to diminish. It will happen. Don't kid yourself. Question 3.
Before we do that, Terry, we heard about the old survivors waiting for their Messiah, the sixth race, to resurrect a new life. That is common. That's common that people are waiting for the second coming. I wonder why he says that so many of the old survivors are in their second infancy.
And that relates to humans. Second infancy is when you get very old and you become more like an infant again. In many ways. So he's just saying they're very old and yet they're waiting for their new Messiah because, as he points out, those that have been downtrodden or now at the bottom of the cycle are going to rise again to the top.
And the concept of a Messiah is how the new subraces are ushered in, the new phases are ushered in, usually with a new teaching, a new spiritual leader. It might not be one person like Jesus. There's usually a Messiah, which doesn't have to be a person. It could be some kind of shifting in consciousness.
And he's going to point out that there are times when a godlike figure reincarnates in a certain group.
Many times it does happen where there is a physical thing. I believe that it doesn't always have to be that, though. It can be just a huge impulse of new energy which ushers in the new age. But usually, like Jesus. And Christianity is waiting for that second coming, which is equivalent to what we're talking about here.
Yes, he is going to explain this in greater detail. Question 3. Even the fifth race of the fourth round, our own, began in Asia 1 million years ago, specifically the Indian continent. What was it about? And he's using the English way. What are you on about? What was it about for the 998,000 years previous to the last 2,000? What were they doing? Have greater civilizations than our own risen and decayed during that period? Yeah, he's clueless here, but he's going to get enlightened.
Yes, the fifth race, ours.
And he's talking you and us.
Even though they're different skin colors, those are just subraces. Began in Asia 1 million years ago. What was it about for the 998,000 years previous to the last 2,000? A pertinent question, offered, moreover, in quite a Christian spirit that refuses to believe that any good could ever have come out of anywhere besides Nazareth 2,000 years ago, right? That's hilarious.
Now, what does he mean by anywhere besides Nazareth?
Oh, Jesus. That's when he was,
Right. And
2,000 years ago.
There's a funny thing in the Bible where it's talking about Jesus' popularity and how people are all talking about how excited they are about this new teacher that has come along. And when they shared it with certain skeptical people, they look at him and said, "Are you kidding? Could anything good come out of Nazareth?" And so he's saying, could anything good come from anywhere but Nazareth?
Oh, that's interesting.
So he's turning it around on these Christians.
That is interesting. What was it about? Well, it was occupying itself pretty much in the same way it does now. In the Eocene age, even in its very first part, the great cycle of the fourth race men, the Atlanteans, had already reached its highest point, and the great continent, the father of nearly all the present continents, showed the first symptoms of sinking, a process that accompanied it until 11,446 years ago, when its last island, which, translating its vernacular name, we may properly call Poseidonis, went down with a crash. So there he mentions the name Poseidonis.
Yes. And the Eocene period began about 56 million years ago and continued up to about 34 million years ago. And that was the time of Atlantis. But the very last continent that was associated with this very large group of people, time-wise, the fourth root race, was millions of years.
Called Atlantis. By the by, Lemuria can no more be confounded with the Atlantic continent than Europe with America. Both sank and were drowned with their high civilizations and, quote, gods. But between the two catastrophes, a short period of about 700,000 years elapsed.
Short period, yeah, 700,000 years.
Lemuria flourishing and ending her career just at about that trifling lapse of time before the early part of the Eocene age, since its race was the third.
Mm-hmm.
Behold the relics of that once great nation and some of the aborigines of your Australia.
Yeah, so there are still some remnants of physical bodies from the third root race, the very end of those. And as we've said many times before, don't ever judge a person based on their physical characteristics. You would be making a huge mistake. So many reasons that people occupy a particular type of body, and we don't know what they are, but they're important for that individual's progress.
Oh, for sure. He is talking about the Lemurian bodies, right?
Yes.
So he's skipping. So that's 2 ago.
Right.
That's not even the last one, which was
Atlantean.
right. The people of India and Egypt were not the refuse of Atlantis. No doubt your geologists are very learned, but why not bear in mind that under the continents explored by them, in the bowels of which they have found the Eocene age and forced it to deliver its secrets to them, there may be, hidden deep in the unfathomed ocean beds, other, far older continents whose strata have never been geologically explored, and which may someday upset entirely their present theories, thus illustrating the simple and sublime truth as connected with inductive generalization, as opposed to their visionary conjectures. Yeah, go down into the ocean, guys, and explore that underground down there, and we might find something different.
You might have to drill down 600 feet or 1,000 feet or more. It's folded deep within the earth. If you look at any of these videos that show the movement of continents over millions of years, it's amazing. And they bump up against one and one goes underneath the other. Imagine how deep one shelf is on top of an older shelf that went underneath it. This is where those older civilizations are.
The chances of there being any physical remains are very slim, though. Even the pressure and the time and the conditions, there's probably nothing really left physically, probably.
Right. So science can't ever catch up to occult science because they don't have the instruments.
You know, the teacup thing that floats around the planet, what's that called?
Russell's teapot.
Teapot. Science can't prove that it doesn't exist. like you can't prove that there's not a teacup floating around Jupiter or whatever it is. So we shouldn't even acknowledge that. If you want to investigate it, we have to use other means, not science. Science can't disprove it. You can't prove that.
If you want to be a real scientist of life, you have to sign up to be an occult scientist. But as we've said, you have to give up everything else if it's what you want.
Why not admit that our present continents have, like Lemuria and Atlantis, been submerged and had time to reappear several times already, and bear their new groups of mankind and civilization, and that our continents will go down and the Lemurias and Atlantises come up again? Now to return to your questions. That is kind of what science acknowledges happens to the tectonic plates. I mean, they do. Pangea, they move, they shift. You can see how South America fits into the African continent. So we know they move.
Right. And it's not just laterally, it's up and
Yes.
down. One goes
Yes.
underneath, and then he's going to point out one that descended comes back up again.
We see that with earthquakes and with fault lines. If you look at the San Andreas Fault, for example, I mean, it's clear that one plate or shelf, that's why they're called shelves. They go under the other. We know that happens. Now to return to your questions. Of course, the fourth race had its periods of the highest civilization. Greek and Roman and even Egyptian civilization are nothing compared to the civilizations that began with the third race. Those of the second were not savages, but they also could not be called civilized.
And we're talking about humans that are not even really human.
And they weren't even physical. They might have been materializing. Yeah, it's very strange. But they were described as different beings. It was not, they didn't have two arms or eyes. Different kinds of creatures.
Pudding bags was the description in one of HPB's descriptions.
That's the second, right. You ask me a direct question, and I answer it. Greeks and Romans were small sub-races, and Egyptians were part and parcel of our own Caucasian stock. Oh, wow. Look at the latter and at India. Having reached the highest civilization and learning, both went down. Egypt as a distinct sub-race disappearing entirely. Her Copts are a hybrid remnant, the Coptic.
Yes, so the Copts are not the old Egyptians. It's a hybrid remnant of those people. So, yeah, we have to be really careful about making generalizations, even based on modern science. So that's why I choose not to spend a whole lot of time, like some people do, trying to separate out all of these sub-races and sub-sub-races and point them to this civilization or that one. There is so much missing information that I prefer to wait because I don't see any immediate need for that, except to understand general situations.
The practical teaching that we can take is very, very, very simple. We reincarnate a bunch of times in a bunch of different bodies in a bunch of different places around the world to learn different things.
And thinking that you are superior to someone else is a huge mistake because you aren't.
India, as one of the first and most powerful offshoots of the mother race and composed of a number of sub-races, had lasted up to these modern times and is struggling to once more take her place in history someday. That history catches but a few stray, hazy glimpses of Egypt some 12,000 years back when, having already reached the apex of its cycle thousands of years before, the latter had begun going down. What does or can history know about India 5,000 years ago, or of the Chaldeans, whom it confounds most charmingly with the Assyrians? Do you know that the Chaldeans were at the apex of their occult fame before what you call the Bronze Age? That the sons of the fire mist preceded by hundreds of centuries the Iron Age, which was an old age already, when what you now call the historical period, probably because what is known of it is generally not history but fiction, had hardly begun.
Now, what are the sons of the fire mist? There are various beings that come to help set the stage at various parts of our development as human beings. Like I said, there are times when an avatar, a godlike being, comes to set the tone and to get things started in a new, huge race of people, like the fourth or fifth or third. And there are other advanced beings, which may or may not be Dhyan Chohans, that come from other parts of our solar system to help out, to help carry on that, and to, at various points, remind people of what they have forgotten in the meantime. Every time one of these more advanced persons shows up and resets the scene, as soon as they leave, it immediately starts declining again. And there's no way around that. There isn't. So you have to make the most you can of what is available until one of those new spiritual beings comes to help out.
Which could be considered a messiah as well. We maintain that far greater civilizations than our own have risen and decayed. It is not enough to say, as some of your modern writers do, that an extinct civilization existed before Rome and Athens were founded. We affirm that a series of civilizations existed before, as well as after the glacial period.
Which is the current ice age, and guess when that started? It started 2.6 million years ago.
The last ice age?
And it ended 11,700 years ago. So, with Poseidonis, that's when it ended. So it had existed for more than 2.5 million years.
How did Atlantis exist during the Ice Age?
Well, the Ice Age doesn't cover the entire globe, and it goes through different phases too.
Okay.
There have been times in the past, science has found out, when virtually the entire planet was frozen.
I'm going to read that sentence again. We affirm that a series of civilizations existed before as well as after the glacial period, that they existed on various parts of the globe, reached the apex of glory, and died. Every trace and memory had been lost of the Assyrian and Phoenician civilizations until discoveries began to be made a few years ago. And now they open up a new page, though not by far one of the earliest pages in the history of mankind. And yet, how far back do those civilizations go in comparison with the oldest? Archaeology and geology have sufficiently demonstrated that the memory of man runs back vastly farther than history has been willing to accept. And the sacred records of once mighty nations, preserved by their heirs, are still more worthy of trust.
Yeah, so these ancient myths and legends shouldn't be just discarded as fantasy. You may not know the ins and outs of it, but they do preserve some truth.
Mm-hmm. We speak of civilizations of the pre-glacial period. What would you say to our affirmation that the Chinese, I now speak of the inland, the true Chinese, not the hybrid mixture between the fourth and fifth races now occupying the throne? I'm talking about the Aborigines who belong wholly to the highest and last branch of the fourth race, reached their highest civilization when the fifth had hardly appeared in Asia, and when its first offshoot was yet a thing of the future. When was it? Calculate. You cannot think that we, who have such tremendous odds against the acceptance of our doctrine, would deliberately go on inventing races and sub-races, in the opinion of Mr. Hume, that's hilarious, if they weren't a matter of undeniable fact.
Yeah, they've told us we know what we're talking about. You can believe us or not.
I told you before that the most spiritually advanced people now on Earth belong to the first sub-race of the fifth root race, and those are the Aryan Asiatics. The most physically and intellectually advanced is the last sub-race of the fifth. The most spiritually advanced people now on Earth belong to the first sub-race of the fifth root race, but that's not as far as the races have progressed. The most physically and intellectually advanced, which is like brain power and physical ability to build bridges and towers and conquer, is the last sub-race of the fifth, which is yourselves, the white conquerors. But they're not the most spiritual. The first sub-race of the fifth. The sub-races aren't sequential, are they? They are. They are sequential, but there's tremendous overlap. Wow.
So, again, that's why thinking that your physical body gives you certain superiority over anyone is pure nonsense.
Pure nonsense. The majority of mankind belongs to the seventh sub-race of the fourth root race. The above-mentioned Chinese and their offshoots and branchlets, Malayans, Mongolians, Tibetans, Javanese, etc., and remnants of other sub-races of the fourth, and the seventh sub-race of the third race. All these fallen, degraded semblances of humanity are the direct lineal descendants of highly civilized nations, neither the names nor memory of which have survived, except in such books as Popol Vuh and a few others unknown to science.
And the Popol Vuh, do you know what that is?
I've heard of that, but no, I don't.
It's the sacred teachings of the Quiche Mayans in Guatemala.
Oh, wow.
And the derivation of the book is kind of unknown because it first appeared in Spanish, but it was not in the Quiche language. They did have a language, but all of their teachings had been conveyed by word of mouth. So at some point, someone transcribed them and converted them into Spanish, and that's what we have available today.
We'll put a pin right there because we're in the middle, and then we'll pick right back up next session.
Cool. All right. So, yes, this is exciting stuff, and let's look forward to our session number 61.
All right.
All right. Thank you.